these are the years. You know, we talk about 2030 as a deadline, but in many ways 2020 is the deadline, because if we're not underway by the time the new president takes office, we really have lost our last shot. It's why there is so much riding on this election. And for me and everybody I know, for the children that we hope to have, for the people who will be alive at the turn of the century, when if we don't change what we're doing, we could lose half the world's oxygen because of what's going on in the oceans. That is unthinkable. And we owe it to, we just cannot look in the eyes of a child right now with a straight face and say we're doing right by them. We owe it to them to get this done before it's too late.
Mr. Mayor, under the category of being the change you want to see, air travel is about 2% of greenhouse gas emissions. The number of travelers obviously going up around the world. Private air travel, therefore, even worse because it serves a smaller population. Your second quarter filing says your campaign spent about $300 grand on private filing. You're going to get the finger shaken at you that you should not be doing that if you're going to be the green guy.
Look, I'm interested in decarbonizing the fuel that goes into air travel. I also don't believe we're going to abolish air travel. This is a big country, and while I absolutely think we can do more to provide alternatives, like trains, I don't think that we're going to solve the question of how to get around the world without air travel. This is the sort of thing that I think we need to look at in a common sense kind of way, and the right loves to sink their teeth into anything we say that makes it seem like we're being unreasonable, when actually all we're saying is there's got to be a way to make it less carbon intensive. Sometimes I took the subway today, sometimes I fly, because this is a very big country and I'm running to be president of the whole country. But look, you know, it involves meeting voters everywhere. But look, we do need to do more to provide alternatives to air travel. I mean, think about the train system, right? In a country that views itself as the greatest, the most modern, the most sophisticated in the world, how is it that we have such an inferior train system when trains are a lot easier to power on a green basis because they run on electricity? You know, think what it would mean for areas like the industrial Midwest, where I live. If places from Indianapolis to Chicago, to South Bend, Detroit, Minneapolis, and so on were just a few hours away from each other by train. I'm not even asking for Japanese-level trains, just maybe like Italian-level trains, and we would be way ahead of where we are right now. But that's going to require policy choices and investment. And if anybody says we shouldn't subsidize trains, they got to stand on their own 2 feet, think about just how many ways we subsidize driving, which is among the most carbon-intensive things we could be doing.
Italian trains, you have a huge upgrade in food, too. There you go. The trains, that'd be nice. All right, we have our Chief Climate Correspondent, Bill Weir. Bill, what's your question?
Mayor, every hour of every day, actually every minute of every day, humanity buys 1 million plastic bottles. The amount of plastic produced in a year is roughly the same as the entire weight of humanity. And as we know in this recycling crisis, it doesn't go away. It's ending up in everything from salt to seafood. So what would you do about this? Plenty of Democrats want to make polluters pay, but does that apply to every company that puts harmful packaging out into the waste stream?
I think it does, because this is one more example of where corporations are literally pushing out the true cost of what they do into a place where it can't be seen. Only it comes back at us. It harms habitats, it ruins environments, and it is profoundly irresponsible. So we need to make sure that we have regulations and incentives that promote things like biodegradable alternatives to plastic. There's already so much going into this. By the way, some of it is coming from sources that are being grown in the heartland of America. We've got to double down on those kinds of investments so that we feel proud rather than guilty when we do handle something that takes the place of plastic, looks like plastic, but is much more responsible for the environment.
Question from David Lowe, a retired religion professor from Flourtown, Pennsylvania. David.
Mayor Pete, thank you for being here with us. It's not all big business's fault. So car companies manufacture gas guzzlers and ranchers raise livestock because we will buy their products. Do you model the kinds of spending changes that consumers need to adopt?
I try to do the right thing. I think about this when I'm making decisions as a consumer. Before life changed a little bit for me, I tried to bike to work whenever I could as mayor in South Bend. But the reality is no individual can be expected single-handedly to solve this problem. It's going to require national action. And by the way, this is why we, and by we I mean like the human species, invented government. It's for dealing with issues that are too big for each of us to deal all act on our own. This is the perfect use case for good government decisions.
So when you look at the transition that's needed on the consumer level, all right, one of the big things we hear all the time is, well, we're moving away from fossil fuels. Well, it means the internal combustion engine. So what do you do to incentivize and to encourage people to move from one of the main parts of our existence, which is how we get around every day, to electric cars?
Well, first of all, and this is in the climate plan that I put forward, we got to make sure that we have the right kind of incentives for that. Expand the tax credits, set them up in the right way, and make sure eventually that we are requiring that emissions fall to zero in American auto production. By the way, when we do that, the companies can respond. The American auto industry is capable of great innovation, but we've got to set up the left and right boundaries for that. It's one of the reasons why the auto companies were actually ahead of the Trump administration when it was trying to pull us back. And again, this is something we try to do the right thing on personally too. I can't afford a Tesla, but we did get a plug-in hybrid. And I think that the potential from a consumer perspective to embrace these kinds of technologies is phenomenal. We just got to do our part to make sure that the economy reflects it. And the carbon taxing is part of that. Regulations are part of that. And making sure we build a culture in which we embrace green solutions is going to be part of that too.
Part of the competition in campaigns is about timing. Yeah, I'll do it too, but I'll do it faster. Coal being removed from the economy in 10 years. That sounds hyper ambitious. Is that a realistic period?
So we envision that taking longer, but I will say that we've got to do it as quickly as humanly possible because we see the consequences of this. They are upon us. Now, our vision, which includes decarbonizing industry on a net basis completely by 2050, but intermediate steps from making sure our vehicles, our light vehicles, and then our heavy vehicles, and then our power grid are each in turn eventually turning into net zero emissions, gets us there in time, at least if we believe the scientists' projections about what we have to do. But look, I don't think anybody's going to object to doing it quicker. The real issue is, again, not who set the right targets. I'm not going to quibble over a 5-year difference between this plan or that plan. We've been wrangling over the same plans for my entire adult lifetime. The question is, how are we going to break the logjam and actually make something happen? And that is going to require a different level of political will. It's going to require democratic reform so that dollars can't outvote people. And by the way, if the only way that we can establish as a matter of American constitutional law that a corporation is different than a person and that spending money to influence an election is different than speech, if the only way we can clear that up is with a constitutional amendment to reverse Citizens United, then that's what we're going to have to do. Because otherwise we see the consequences.
Let's bring in Nancy Romer from Brooklyn, New York. She's a retired psychology professor and full-time volunteer climate activist. Nice to have you with us, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. All people want good jobs, and as a proud union member, I'd say we all want good union jobs that ensures the good jobs. And everyone wants a safe community to live in, clearly. But what would you do to ensure a just transition for displaced workers in the new renewable energy economy and for people from communities, particularly communities of color, most affected by climate change in your vision of a Green New Deal? And will you support the upcoming global student strike on September 20th for climate?
Great. So I'll start with the last one's easy, which is I'm very supportive, so yes.
Great. Thank you.
Again, there's something about the moral authority of young people looking into the eyes of those in charge and saying, what are you doing to protect us? That I think on issues from guns to climate is part of why we're finally going to see change. And so we've got to embrace these actions that make it possible for the political conversation to be shaken up the way that it needs to be. Now, in terms of the broader question about jobs, this is extremely important in the industrial Midwest where I live. And again, people need to see where they have a role in this future, and a role besides that of victim. And we can do that. As you know, a lot of the jobs that are being created in the green economy are also good-paying union jobs. And jobs, not all of them are exotic. A lot of them are good old-fashioned building trades jobs that we're going to need more of to do the retrofits to get the energy efficiency that we need. We can create tremendous economic opportunity, but let's be honest about the fact that this also means transition for a lot of people. It's one of the reasons why my climate plan includes funds that will support everything from retirement to healthcare to transition assistance for people who do find, as a result of this national mobilization we've got to undertake, that their role in the economy is shifting. But let's be honest, this is about more than money. As important as it is to replace the income of people whose incomes are disrupted. This is also about identity. When somebody has been in a certain industry, perhaps providing for their family for generations, I make sure that we recognize that that has been a source of community and identity and purpose, as well as income. And that's why sometimes these well-intentioned retraining programs, at least where I come from, leave a lot of people cold. So we gotta make sure that we're providing the same source of pride, the same source and sense of identity that you get from whatever your role might have been in a form of the economy that's going to have to transition out. You have that same sense of pride for what you're doing in helping us move toward a new economy that we're going to be proud of for generations to come.
So you have the anxiety of the worker. But as David was asking earlier, there is something about the anxiety of the consumer and the citizen. One of the things that we keep being told by science is, this cattle issue is a real situation. And as he was pointing out, it really is about supply and demand. If you don't want the beef, they don't raise the cattle the same way. But that's a big ask in American culture. So what do you say to the Americans that you want to persuade who maybe aren't that left? Maybe they're in the center or center right, and they're saying, you want me to eat less beef?
Look, first of all, I'm from Indiana, and secondly, I love cheeseburgers. So I get that this is an issue, and the important thing to understand and get across is that we can have a more balanced diet, and therefore a more balanced footprint, and not propose that they abolish the cow, which is what a lot of people are saying about the Green New Deal. Not because that's what it actually envisions, but because it's an easy Republican talking point. Of course we need balance in all of our consumption patterns. And part of what a carbon tax and dividend does is it resets the price signals in the market to help make that happen without ordering Americans to abandon something that is very important to them. Instead, we change the economic signals, we bring it into balance, and balance is what we have lost when it comes to our relationship with creation, with the earth that sustains our ability to live.
Let's go to a video question. Brianne Foster, she's from Montgomery, Alabama. She's an Air Force reservist and a school science teacher. Here's Brianne's question.
Good evening. The U.S. military is heavily reliant on fossil fuels and is a significant contributor to global greenhouse emissions. Additionally, military resources and bases are at risk from sea level rise and increased heat. What is your plan to ensure that the military helps to solve the climate crisis instead of contributing to it, while also preparing for a new climate reality?
What a great question, and there's a lot of pieces in there. Part of it's the threat side, the fact that global threats are revolving as a consequence of climate. We already mentioned Syria, but also there is a lot of reason to believe that migration and immigration issues are going to get more difficult at our own borders as a consequence of climate-related disruption. So we know it's changing the threats. We know that bases right now are vulnerable. The exciting thing is that the military can also be a huge part of the solution. And one of the things that was certainly true when I was in the military is that you just figure out a way to get done what you've been ordered to do. The military's got an amazing capacity to rally to achieve what is being asked of them. And frankly, there have been times, even though we think of the military as a conservative institution, there are times when the military has actually been out front relative to a lot of parts of America. And by following instructions to get something done, helps bring other parts of America along. It was true with racial integration of the armed forces. It was true in some measure with the end of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, too. A workplace that is ahead of some other workplaces, sadly, in this country, when it comes, at least officially speaking, to LGBT equality. Imagine if we harnessed that same ability to get things done when it comes to the biggest crisis on our plates, by making sure that, for example, fleet and future uses of fuel are relying on biofuels, by making sure that the installed base of the American military footprint is carbon neutral or carbon negative. Even making sure before you get to the ships, the airplanes, and the bases, just making sure that the U.S. military, which is a huge purchaser of things like ordinary cars and vans, is leading the way in ensuring that we meet targets of doing it that are of purchasing vehicles that are zero carbon. And my plan calls for us to do that very quickly. I think that the purchasing power of the U.S. military and just the resolve of our service members to get stuff done when it is a national priority could help lead the way for the rest of society and be one more example of how we create the sense of a national mobilization, a national project that summons everything that all of us bring to the table in order to deal with something that we know we will regret if we don't act fast.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. All right, let's move to the former Texas Congressman Medal Award. He says climate change is the greatest threat the nation faces. Plus, you have Senator Cory Booker. That's all ahead. Again, thank you, Mayor Buttigieg, and please stay with CNN. Thank you.
Anyone can deliver pizza. Only Marco's can deliver America's most loved pizza. Hot and fresh and right to your door. Dough made from scratch every day. Sauce from the original Gianmarco recipe. And authentic toppings like crispy old world pepperoni. That's Italian quality pizza. And it makes the moment primo. Every day at Marco's.
Hey, I just wanted to jump on. I'm sorry for some of the technical difficulties I have been having, but I think we straightened them out now. I wanted to welcome people who are new because I've been doing this since 5, running this live stream, and I'm thrilled to do it. This is the normal time. Actually, yeah, it is, that I have my live show each Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's a show about for people to participate. And I would love for you guys to keep coming. It's a weekly show every Wednesday at 9. It's called Real Talk with Angry Soccer Mom. And it's basically about all the issues we have in America with racism, bigotry, and inequality. So today, instead of having the talk show we normally do, we are listening live to the CNN stream of all of the Democratic people who are running for president. What they're doing is they weren't able to get a debate on climate change, and so CNN stepped up to the plate. And I don't know the details, but they are holding basically interviews from 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time till midnight Eastern Time with a number of the candidates. And so instead of me yakking the whole time and talking, basically we're messaging and giving our opinions and having conversation. So thank you so much for being here. So normally I have the live show every Wednesday at 9 Eastern, but today's a special show. So, and now I will be quiet. It's hard, but I'm going to do it.
Forbidden from this room. Here we go. Oh my gosh, you're so late. Sorry I'm naked, but it's okay. Nice to meet you. I'm a bit of a design show addict, so it was really exciting to have my own before and after moment through Monty. It blew me away. When I first looked at my room rendering, my mouth just fell open because I'd never seen my room this way.
It's like this aha moment where it's like, whoa, that's actually our living room.
Working with our designer was really seamless. It was very easy to make the room what I wanted.
I didn't think that we could have a house like out of a magazine.
This is exactly what I want to come home to.
Yeah, hair loss runs in my family, but I use Keeps, the easiest way to keep my hair, and it only costs $1 a day. Learn more at Keeps.com.
When you only got a few hours of sleep last night, you need something fresh. When your day is just non-stop. With Daily Harvest, you can have delicious, clean food that's ready when you are. Go to dailyharvest.com and get started today. Nobody is untouchable.
Declassified. Return September 29th at 9.
Welcome back, everyone, to this unprecedented night here on CNN. I'm Don Lemon. Thank you so much for joining us, for staying with us. We've heard from 8 candidates on this stage, and we have 2 Democratic presidential candidates left, answering voters' questions about the climate emergency. You know, scientists tell us that we are seeing the consequences of the climate crisis now. That will cause a massive tipping point if the world warms more than 1.5 degrees Celsius or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit. We've already warmed up the planet by 1 degree since the Industrial Revolution, so we're more than halfway there already. And right now, as you know, the Carolinas are bracing for Hurricane Dorian and its potentially life-threatening storm surge. For the very latest now, let's go to the CNN Weather Center with CNN's Jennifer Gray. Jennifer.
Don, I wouldn't be surprised if this storm reaches Category 3 status once again. It's only 1 mile per hour shy of that as far as the winds go, with 110 mile per hour winds. It has been intensifying a little bit on the late afternoon and evening hours. Gusts of 130. It's about 120, 130 miles south of Charleston right now, and it is heading in a northerly direction. Now, South Carolina, North Carolina, they will get the brunt of it, especially places like Charleston that can't handle a lot of water being pushed in. We could see near record flooding across there as far as tides go. You can see the center of the storm right there. The eye is expanding very, very wide. We're also going to get storm surge all up and down the Carolina coast, including North Carolina, as this could make a potential landfall in South Carolina or North Carolina in the next day or so. Don?
Jennifer Gray, thank you very much for that. Scientists have partly blamed human-induced climate change for the intensity of these storms that are hitting our coastal states. Which brings me now to our next candidate. So everyone, please welcome former Texas Congressman Beto O'Rourke. Welcome, Congressman. Good to see you. Good to see you so much. Right off. Thank you all. Gracias. The first thing that you do to deal with this climate crisis. Day one, re-enter the Paris Climate Agreement. On that same day, make sure that we lead the world in going well beyond the Paris Climate Agreement. Ensure that we regulate and enforce reduced greenhouse gas emissions from methane, and then get to net zero on public lands by ensuring we have no new oil and gas leases on federally protected lands and offshore areas that are now being drilled today. Those three steps are a great place to start and a good pace to set. And we follow that up by making sure that we have legally enforceable standards every single year over which no polluter can emit. We make sure that we get to net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, earlier if we can, halfway there by 2030, and then we protect the most vulnerable communities, those who are on the front lines of climate change and pollution, make sure that we lift them up, protect their populations, and ensure that there's environmental justice in this country. Lifting up, I should have worn taller shoes. All right, Congressman, let's get started. I want to get things started with Priya Sabharwal. Priya is from Frisco, Colorado. She's a student at New York University, majoring in environmental studies, and she currently supports Elizabeth Warren. Priya, what's your question? Hey, Priya.
Hi. So your climate proposal is unclear as to whether or not you support a carbon tax. What deters you from a carbon tax or from a cap and trade system? And if you are unwilling, what standards would you alternatively put in place to create a legally enforceable standard for emissions?
So we should certainly price carbon. I think the best possible path to do that is through a cap and trade system. There would be allowances granted or sold to polluters, not just in the energy sector, but in transportation as well as our industrial sector. Cement, steel, the chemicals that we produce. There would be a set number of allowances that would decrease every single year because the clock is running. We have a little more than 10 years left. We don't have time to experiment. So I think that is the best possible path to ensure that there's a price for carbon and pollution in our economy, set the standard here, and then lead the globe, convene the other powers of the planet to make sure that they're doing their part as well. Thanks for the question. Just to be clear, do you support a carbon tax, yes or no? No, I think that a cap and trade is the best possible path. I think that's the best way to send the pricing signal to ensure that there's a legally enforceable limit, and so that's the path that I'm going to choose. All right. Congressman, I'm bringing Lauren Skinner. Lauren submitted a video. She's from Bel Air, Maryland. She's a teacher and a mother to 2 boys. Here she is, Lauren.
I'm trying my best to go green, and I'm finding it to be quite expensive. For instance, even with state and federal tax credits, solar panels cost thousands of dollars. The average American does not have this kind of money set aside when they have so many other expenses. My question for you is, as president, what will you do specifically to make going green more affordable for all Americans? Thank you very much.
So, Lauren, thank you for your question. And it's related to Priya's question as well. I was talking about cap and trade. Those allowances that we sell, that income, that revenue is used to help Americans meet the cost of a transitioning economy by making sure that all of us can meet our obligations when it comes to climate change. So that's investment in those communities that are on the front lines. That's an investment making sure that you can afford solar panels or an electric vehicle. That's an investment in communities to make sure that we have transit or housing that is closer to where people work. I routinely meet people who are driving 1 or 2 hours to work, who are being paid a minimum wage or maybe a little bit more, unable to afford the life that they have, so they're working a second or a third job. If we create more housing stock closer to where people live and have the resources to invest in that through a cap and trade system, then we're going to be able to meet our challenges and improve the quality of life of our fellow Americans.
What would you like to see Americans do to help fight climate change? What can we all do in our own lives?
Yeah, I want us to respond to this with the urgency that this crisis demands. And I see that, by the way, from some of the people who are here, some of the young people in particular who understand that we don't get a second chance at this. I see that from my own kids, who are going to be younger than I am right now by the year 2050, whose judgment I fear more than anything else, who I love more than anything else. And I want to make sure that we get that right. And I feel that same urgency, that same ambition, and that same understanding that this is America, and we're up to this challenge. We can convene the ingenuity, the innovation of the private sector. We can lead from the public sector through those parameters and mandates that we set. We can perform to that, and we can lead the world on the greatest challenge that we've ever had. To quote Winston Churchill, this could be our finest hour. And I want America to come together, regardless of Republicans or Democrats or your geography or any other difference. Do not allow that to divide us at this critical, important, defining moment. This is our challenge, and I know that we are up to the test.
I didn't offer you a seat. You okay standing?
I'm great standing. Thank you.
Yeah. Let's bring in Todd Fernandez, an international human rights lawyer here in New York. Todd, what do you have for us?
Hi there.
Good evening. I'm so panicked by this crisis that I've now dedicated my future career to climate activism full time. And I grew up in a Republican household in Florida a long time ago. And my question is, Republicans used to be the protectors of nature. So how do we renew that spirit among the people of Texas and America in general?
Yeah, great point. I'm thinking about Teddy Roosevelt, one of the great Republican leaders of more than a century ago, who was so instrumental in protecting our public lands. Republicans, as well as Democrats, as well as independents, have kids and grandkids, care about the future of this planet, care about the future of the generations that will follow them, and want to do the right thing. How do I know that? I campaigned for the United States Senate in the state of Texas. Every single one of the 254 counties that I went to, we talked about climate change. We talked about freeing ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, about investing in wind and solar, the renewable energy technologies that will allow us to meet our obligations to that future generation and also create the high-value, high-wage, high-skilled jobs that are demanded in this country right now. And at the end of the day, we won more votes than any Democrat had in Texas history, won independence for the first time in decades, and more than 400,000 Republicans, like my mom, who we convinced to vote for me, supported us in that election. So I found that this is more of a popular issue across party lines than I would have imagined before. This is something that can unite us, and I think we just have to speak boldly and confidently about a progressive agenda that allows us to get there, and the country is there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did you convince your mother to vote for you?
I did, yes.
I just want to let me follow up on her question here, because, as you know, President Trump has rolled back a number of Obama era environmental regulations, including plans announced just today to reverse a rule about energy-efficient light bulbs. Would you bring back all of those Obama era regulations?
Absolutely. Higher vehicle emissions standards, a clean power plan so that the electricity that we're generating is clean, and we completely electrify this economy from our power sector to our transportation sector to our industrial sector. We put farmers in the driver's seat. The next iteration of the Farm Bill pays them for the environmental services that they want to provide, planting cover crops, keeping more land under conservation, allowing them to use regenerative agriculture and ranching. That's the way of the future. And those farmers and ranchers and producers and growers are already there. They want to lead the way. They just need a government that reflects that. So yes, let's not only reverse the damage that Donald Trump has done. and he's done a lot. Let's go much further than any administration before his has gone. That's our opportunity right now, and I want us to meet that challenge.
All right, let's continue on with the audience questions here. Standing in front of you is Juliana Hassi DiCamargo. She lives in Washington, D.C., where she works as a fellow at the Sunrise Movement, a youth climate change, chairman, at the Climate Change Advocacy Group. Juliana, what do you have?
I'm from Brazil, and I immigrated to various countries before coming to the United States. I witnessed the climate crisis in each country I've lived in, from droughts in Angola, from flash floods in Brazil, to contaminated water in Ecuador, and extreme weather in the U.S. Now, the Amazon is being burned. A big incentive for deforestation comes from U.S. investors in the Brazilian meat industry. How will you use U.S. trade leverage to encourage Brazil to protect these vital resources and the indigenous people who live there?
Great question. Juliana, thank you for the question, and also thank you for your leadership on this. You and other members of the Sunrise Movement are going to be the ones who are going to receive the credit for this change that we're talking about today. You have forced those in positions of power and those who seek positions of public trust to do the right thing and to address these issues. So you mentioned our involvement and investment in Brazil. This is one of the pernicious outcomes of Donald Trump's trade policies. This trade war with China that has not only closed markets that farmers in Iowa and across this country have worked their entire lives to open up, it's not only put them further in debt at a time of declining farm incomes, it is providing an incentive for people to burn down the Amazon rainforest, to plant soybeans so that they can sell into China, because China right now is looking for new sellers, new producers for those soybeans that they're no longer buying from the United States of America. So our trade policies, our leadership, the blown opportunities at the G7 summit to convene those other top wealthy economies, to make sure that this is our focus, to save the lungs of the planet that produce 6% of the oxygen that we breathe, and ensure that we do not trigger a crisis in the Amazon. Once it is set, we will never be able to roll back. This is our opportunity. That is the threat that we face. And so we must be an international leader on these issues. In Brazil, in Guatemala, where we've helped to precipitate a drought that they have never seen before, which has forced families to travel 2,000 miles to come to this country seeking asylum and refuge and salvation, only to have their children placed in kids and their parents deported back. We have to understand that we are all connected on this planet. We all have a responsibility, and the United States especially, the indispensable country, has the opportunity to lead. And as president, I will. Thank you for asking.
All right. Congressman, everyone stand by. We're going to have more voter questions for former Congressman O'Rourke in just a moment. And in minutes, Senator Cory Booker. All right.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being here tonight and watching these. I was really surprised that this wasn't, done from a national level, and they had to get CNN or, a media outlet to actually have these type of conversation, but I'm glad they did. I've been here, the reason I'm eating dinner is because I've been here since 5, and I will try to stay till Cory Booker finishes. This is my normal time. I have a live show every Wednesday at 9 Eastern, and the show is all about hearing the voices of people that have something to say about racism, bigotry, and inequality in America. And it is for everybody to voice their opinion and come together. And it's also a great tool for white folks to learn, because a lot of times in the U.S., white folks do not know our own racial history. And if you're white and you don't know your own racial history, then you don't know America. So it's really important. So I wanted to thank everyone for being here. I'm going to stand for Cory Booker and then say good night. But each Wednesday I have a show, and it's been going on for, let me see, I'm on my 54th show. And I'm starting a new program I mentioned earlier. I'm very excited about it. It's a panel on Sundays where I will not be blabbing. I'll just kind of facilitate it. And a panel of people will talk about a very important, issue that we'll have prearranged. And I'm going to ask everybody and everyone who'd like to join in that. If you're knowledgeable about racism, bigotry, and inequality, if you have some sort of degree in that field, and if you don't, let's just say you have a PhD in experience, everyone is welcome to be on the panel. And so that's my newest project. Please jump on and check out my videos. Some of them are crazy rants that are kind of obnoxious, and some of them are just educational, because I was a special ed teacher for many years and that's my passion. So I'm going to be quiet. Miracles never cease, and it's great to have some new people. And good night, Ali. Good night. Thank you for being here. And Jamie, I'm thrilled to have you here. You're the first person from New Zealand. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. And I promise to be quiet, at least for a little while. And don't be shy to tell me what you think about all this. Just thrilled.
Let's talk about food, like this pig we scoured the world for. At Daily Harvest, we take our time, so you don't have to. This is nourishing, thoughtful, real food, ready to eat in minutes. Go to dailyharvest.com and get started today.
Cover it up. That's what I did when I started losing my hair. Then I realized I could actually do something. Now I use Keeps, the easiest way to keep my hair. And it only costs $1 a day, which means no more covering up. Get started at Keeps.com.
I'm going to type in the word porn and see what comes up.
She did say porn.
Welcome back here. A historic night here on CNN with the top 10 Democratic presidential candidates. In just a few minutes, we're going to hear from Senator Cory Booker, but we want to get more of your questions now for former Congressman Beto O'Rourke. So let's bring in now, I want to bring in Peggy Shepard, Congressman, bring her into the conversation. She is a co-founder and executive director of We Act for Environmental Justice. It's based in New York, right in New York City. Getting lots of applause. It's a group that fights for equal environmental protections for people of color and low-income residents. Peggy, what's your question?
Yes, good evening.
Good evening.
An important environmental justice concern is extreme heat, which kills more residents each year than storm surge. So what would you do to address this issue through building codes or policies that really begin to address the escalating energy costs and the lack of air conditioning and the lack of the ability to pay for air conditioning by vulnerable populations? Over 31%, over 31 million households in this country are energy insecure.
Peggy, thanks for the work that you're doing. Thank you for asking the question. And thank you for pointing out a very real and present crisis that we have in this country right now and across much of the world. We talked about the ability to spend on helping those communities who are on the front lines of climate change right now through the revenues from a cap and trade system. So that means that those communities very often lower income, and right now race and ethnicity is the best predictor to your proximity to a polluter, are first in line to get the help that they need, that they deserve, and that they've missed for generations. This is a personal issue for me. El Paso, Texas is the second fastest warming city in the United States of America today. We've had more than 14 days over 100 degrees over the month of August, which broke the record for as long as we've been setting records in our community. And I'll tell you something, Peggy and Don. My son Henry, who's 8 years old, when I was talking to him the other night, he asked me, Dad, if you win and you become president, we get to live in El Paso, right? And I said, no, if we win, the way this works, we will live in Washington, D.C. But he knew, because I had told him about the warming that we face, that our community will be uninhabitable, will not sustain human life along this current trajectory unless something dramatically and fundamentally changes. So the people of El Paso and the Desert Southwest and the Lower Ninth Ward in New Orleans and Charleston, South Carolina and Miami, Florida, really the people of this country are counting on all of us right now to stand up and be counted and do the right thing. So we will make those investments, but the most important thing is to arrest the rate of climate change on this planet, to ensure that we do not warm a 1.5 degrees Celsius over those pre-industrial revolution levels, and that is my #1 priority, and that's why climate was the first plan I released as a candidate for the presidency. Thanks for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Congressman Romaya Lays is standing right in front of you. I think it's important to point out that she was living in Puerto Rico when Hurricane Maria struck. She's now living in Rochester, New York. What's your question?
Yes. We all know about the recent events that made Puerto Rico to be in the international media, especially about the wrong handling of funds and other types of assistance that were sent after the hurricane hit. This made us victims very angry, feel betrayed, and heartbroken. What will your plan be if another natural event happens to make sure that victims get their necessary assistance on time and in a fair way?
It makes me angry as well. I hope it makes everybody angry. The way that we've treated the people of Puerto Rico, our fellow Americans who were left in harm's way without the necessary investment in the infrastructure to mitigate the storms that we knew were going to hit them, that are only more severe and more frequent and more devastating thanks to our excesses, our emissions, our inaction in the face of climate change. And to add insult to injury, President Trump is taking money away from FEMA to send it to the U.S.-Mexico border, one of the safest places in America today, to try to build a wall or put more kids in cages or try to militarize a problem that we do not have in this country right now. And that's at the expense of the people in South Carolina and Florida, North Carolina, and Puerto Rico. So I want to make sure that we fully fund those disaster response agencies. I want to make sure that we fully fund pre-disaster mitigation grants, because we know the people of Puerto Rico are going to see more storms like the ones that they've seen in the past, only they're going to be much larger and much deadlier. And so we need to invest ahead of time, not afterwards. And then the last thing, we need to make sure that the people of Puerto Rico can determine their future. Now, whether that is independence, whether they want to remain a territory, or whether that is statehood with 2 U.S. senators who can go to town for them in the U.S. Congress to bring down the resources that they need, we need to support the people of Puerto Rico. Thank you for asking.
Congressman, as you know, Texas has been hit hard by climate disasters recently, and you know Harvey was particularly damaging to Houston, Texas. Yet it has been reported that many people are rebuilding, moving right back into homes in the exact locations that are known to flood now, badly now, or in the future. The question is, parts of Houston or Texas, are there parts that people should simply not live in so that because they're too risky now?
We should help people move when they need to move, when they have repaired their homes not once, not twice, but 3 times just in the last 5 years, because Houston, Texas, the example you gave, has witnessed 3 500-year storms in 5 years. They should be good for 1,500 years, but they're not. Because if we listen to the scientists, and I do, we know that those storms are going to become ever more frequent. We were in the Kashmir Gardens neighborhood with their neighborhood president, Keith Downey, and he was showing us some of these homes a year after Harvey hit that had still not been rebuilt. On every other lamppost or telephone pole, there was a yellow sign that said, "Sell your home for cash." And people worked. They worked a lifetime to build up the equity in those homes, but they can no longer afford to rebuild them, and they're going to lose them for pennies on the dollar. This is an issue of environmental justice that Peggy was talking about. So let's, as Americans, invest in the people of Houston and the southeast of America, and every community that's on the front lines of climate change, to rebuild where we can and to move where we must. It's not an inexpensive proposition, but what is far more expensive is to continue to pay to rebuild, to measure the cost of climate change if we do not meet it, in not the billions, but the trillions of dollars going forward. So let's invest now so we can pay less now than we would have to be paying now.
Are there parts of Houston and parts of Texas where people simply should not live because it's too risky?
I think there are neighborhoods that have repeatedly flooded. People who would move out of those neighborhoods if they could, they are sick and tired of being flooded and rebuilding, but they cannot afford to do that. And that's why under my administration, we are going to invest the resources that will allow people to move to safer ground, rebuild their homes, rebuild their businesses, and rebuild their lives.
All right, Congressman. I want to move on now to Daniela Samari. Daniela is a graduate student studying environmental science and policy at Columbia University. She currently supports Senator Elizabeth Warren. Daniela?
Good evening. Drastic environmental consequences of the climate crisis have caused enormous human migration movements for communities in the global south. What would be America's strategy to address migration and the potential influx of immigrants under your administration?
Danielle, thank you for the question, and go Lions. I'm a Columbia grad. Let's begin by acknowledging our culpability and our responsibility connected to that. It is the global north, the wealthiest countries in the north that have produced the majority of the climate change that we're seeing that is disproportionately impacting not just the global south, but countries like the Bahamas. What if we started there, given the fact that they just got pounded by the largest storm they have ever seen? What if we offered temporary protective status, TPS, to anyone in the Bahamas who wants to come and seek shelter and refuge here in the United States of America? What if to those in Guatemala, who are facing the greatest drought that country has ever seen, what if we don't turn them away from the U.S.-Mexico border, make them remain in place in Ciudad Juarez, which has 13,000 people who are fleeing the deadliest places on the planet and those places that have borne the brunt of climate change so far, honor our own asylum laws and the best traditions of this country of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees, and allow them to apply for asylum and include as a permissible part of the application those who have been impacted by climate change. It's the right thing to do. It's just. It's part of our great tradition as a country of immigrants. And by the way, those who come to this country will reveal their genius here. They will make us better by their very presence. Stronger, more successful, and safer, as I can attest, in El Paso, Texas, one of the safest cities in the United States, a city
under international laws, as refugees under international law. Secretary Castro has proposed creating a special category for climate refugees. Would you do the same thing?
Yes. As I just said, I think that is part of our responsibility. And also, we, better than any other country on the face of the planet, understand the benefit that we gain when immigrants and refugees and asylum seekers come here. They do great things for themselves and their families. They do great things for all of us. That is what has made us the greatest country on the face of the planet. So I see this as both an obligation, a responsibility, but also an opportunity.
Yeah. See that guy staring at you right there?
Bill.
That's Bill. He's our chief climate change correspondent. He's got more questions for you, Bill.
We're coming down to the ninth inning, Congressman. Good to see you. A question I'm sure you hear in Texas every now and then. To grow 1 pound of beef, it takes 20 times the land and creates 20 times the carbon pollution as 1 pound of plant protein. So as president, how do you think the American diet should change, agriculture should change, and to all those carnivores in your state, can they have their steak and eat it too? Bones, I knew that one was going to die.
Thanks for asking the question. The answer is yes, but what we eat, what we consume, how we live is all going to have to reflect the true cost of carbon and climate change and pollution. And I'm confident that those ranchers in Texas, whom I've visited with, and my wife grew up on a cattle ranch in New Mexico, they're going to be able to meet the targets that we set. I believe in the ingenuity of the American rancher and the American farmer. I believe that we can be up to these challenges and reject any notion that we have to radically or fundamentally change how we eat or what we eat. I think we just have to be more responsible in the way that we do it. And the best way to do that is to allow the market to respond by setting a price on carbon in every single part of our economy, every facet of American life.
Yeah. You got one lady across, and she's wearing the Cow Pots t-shirt, sitting right in front.
Go dairy farmers. Yes, yeah. Appreciate it.
Colin Evans is here. He is a PhD student at Cornell University studying atmospheric science. Colin, welcome.
Hi, Colin.
Good evening. Congressman, many candidates on stage tonight and you in the recent past have said that climate change is our greatest existential threat. Those are really strong words. And while I agree, I think it's important to know why. So I'm curious to know if you've sat down with climate scientists to discuss what's actually going on, if you have a climate scientist on your staff, and do you fully understand the fundamental physical problems of greenhouse warming?
Yeah, thank you for asking the question. Yes, I've listened to and read the work that scientists produced 300 years after the Enlightenment. I think they're the best subject matter experts on what we're talking about today. So I believe in that science and in the truth and in the facts. And that's reflected in the policies that we've adopted, the proposals that we make, the $5 trillion that we want to be able to activate over the next 10 years to meet this existential threat. But I also read a book that changed fundamentally how I look at this, Uninhabitable Earth, which describes the consequences of our inaction, which says that in the year 2100, when my 8-year-old son, Henry, is going to be 88 years old, this planet will have warmed 4.5 to 5 degrees Celsius. As scientists say, at that point, we are screwed. We will not be able to live in the places that we call home, today. There will be a fierce competition for resources on this planet. Wars that were precipitated by climate change, like Syria, will pale in comparison to the wars that we see in the future. And if you think that apprehending 400,000 at the U.S.-Mexico border last year was a big number, wait until some parts of the Western Hemisphere can no longer support human life, because that's exactly where we are headed unless we decide to change course now. 10 years left to us, not as Democrats or Republicans or even as Americans, but as human civilization. We do not have any room for error. So I will continue to listen to those scientists. They will be part of the team leading the effort in my administration, and we will be up to this challenge and overcome it. Thank you for asking.
Appreciate it. Another video question for you from Amy Tomlin. Great.
I really like them.
You're from an oil-rich state. How does your climate plan create opportunity for people whose economies have relied on fossil fuels like oil towns in Texas and coal towns in West Virginia? What do you say to people who think that green energy threatens their way of life and financial future? And how will you get them on board with your plan?
Great question. I come from an oil and gas rich state. I come from a wind and sun rich state. We lead the country in the amount of wind generation that we produce. We will soon lead the country when it comes to solar energy generation in our state. We've invested in the transmission lines and the infrastructure that makes it possible. And by the way, y además, the high skill, the high value, the high wage jobs that come along with that. Look, the best way to answer her question is to go to those towns that are at the center of the oil and gas industry. And that's what I've been doing across the state of Texas, listening to those who work in the oil fields about what their future holds. And listen, they care just as much about this issue as any one of us do. They just want to know that they will be made whole, that they'll be okay, that they can receive the education and training necessary to transition into those wind or solar jobs or some other career or profession. They want to know that we're going to elevate the role of unions, create 5 million apprenticeships over the next 10 years to make sure that we have the skills, the trade to command those high skill, high wage jobs that we can create in this country if we only set our minds to it. Last week, I was in Bland County, Virginia. This is part of coal country in the southwestern part of the state. I was told by those at the town hall meeting that no presidential candidate from either party has ever been to Bland County before. Many of them worked in the coal industry, know that that's not the future of this country, but want to make sure that we protect their pensions and their health care, and that we electrify or connect their communities to broadband internet, which they're missing right now, which they know is fundamental towards completing an education, looking for a job, starting a small business. Those aspects of modern life that many of us take for granted that are missing from many parts of this country right now. They too will be first in line in our investments to make sure that we make everyone whole as we transition this economy and this country to meet the greatest challenge that we've ever faced.
All right. Let's talk about offshore drilling for oil. Would you ban it?
Yes, absolutely. Going to follow the lead of Joe Cunningham in South Carolina, who's going to make sure that we do not destroy our heritage, that we do not foul our beaches and our opportunity to attract tourism to South Carolina, and that we stop putting oil wells along our coastal areas. The people of Texas and Louisiana know all too well the price of offshore drilling. When we make mistakes, they are big ones. And they're hard to reverse, they're hard to clean up, they damage those communities, the wildlife, the economies of those parts of the world. So no new oil and gas leases offshore, no new oil and gas leases on federally protected lands. All existing leases will reflect the true costs of pollution, climate change, and carbon. I think that's the best way to keep that oil and gas in the ground and make sure that we fully free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels.
Finally, I want to ask you, the biggest personal sacrifice that you're asking, quickly if you can, that you're asking Americans to make to solve this climate crisis?
I'm asking Americans to make this our priority as a country. One of the reasons I love the framing of the Green New Deal is it uses some of the language that we might associate with the way that we met the response of Nazi Germany in World War II. All of this country coming together with a singular focus of making sure that we overcome what was at that time an existential threat to this country and to our democracy. And by the way, lifting millions of people out of poverty and creating what was at the time the world's greatest middle class, creating the world's greatest country in the process. We call them now the greatest generation. That could be our opportunity right here in 2019 and in this election that will decide in 2020. I know Americans are up to the challenge because I've been listening to Americans all across this country. We just need leadership that reflects that opportunity, that ambition, our aspirations, and the hard work, the commitment, and the ingenuity that we'll bring to that to get it done. I want to be the president who achieves that for America.
All right.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate it. Yes, yes, yes. Our town hall is going to continue in just a moment with Senator Cory Booker.
The king and queen.
I am going to take this opportunity to thank everybody for being here and listening and your comments. For some reason, I'm unable to comment any longer. I guess that's YouTube's way of saying they're done with me for the night for some reason. But I wanted to thank everybody here for being here. This was wonderful. If you know anyone who wasn't able to, or doesn't have cable, or wasn't able to catch all this, this will be right on my Angry Soccer Mom YouTube channel. So send them this way. I'm surprised this wasn't just completely free and open to everybody, but apparently that's not how it worked. Just as a reminder, my Angry Soccer Mom YouTube channel has tons and tons and tons and tons of crazy videos, rants, insane rants from me, educational stuff for beginning people who are just learning about systemic racism and just kind of seeing what's going on here. And I hope that you guys check out my videos. Tell me what you think. I want to know, and I will write back eventually. I'm kind of slow sometimes, but I try. And the Anton, thank you so much. I was going to respond to what you said, but they won't let me type anymore. I hope that people will consider joining me each Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern for my regularly scheduled, this is not my regularly scheduled show. I've been here since 5 to get everyone talking, and it's been amazing. Normally, I do a live show each Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and I start with a rant, and then we open it up to anything having to do with racism, bigotry, and inequality in America, and we have a discussion. So I'd love you to come to that. That's a weekly show, and I'm starting as soon as I can a Sunday panel, a Sunday night panel. And the panel is going to consist of people of all walks of life who have something to say about racism, bigotry, and inequality. And it's going to change every week, so I kind of have to facilitate all that and get it together. But thank you so much for being here. And once again, if you can't get this, if you know somebody who couldn't get this and couldn't watch it, come onto my YouTube channel and they can watch the whole thing. So good night, everybody. And I would write good night, but it's not letting me. So hopefully I'll see you next Wednesday at 9 p.m. Don't be a stranger. PM me. I'm on Facebook, Angry Soccer Mom. And if you give me a message there, I would love it. All right. Be safe, everybody. Thank you. This was wonderful. Good night.
I'm not gonna stay home.
No, I'm not. No. I don't know how to end it, but
Broadcast thing and click on that.
it's not letting me. It also wouldn't let me type in anything else.
Well, it's not in that book. Remember, it's the XSplit thing.
Yeah. So we're still on as far as I know. Hi, everybody. I think we've pushed this computer to its capacity. Yeah? My computer's gone mad. this thing's going.
There's some window open and I can't see it.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's it, but it won't let me do anything.
Close it.
Why did you move it down here?
But it didn't do anything. Never tried so hard to end a show in my life. I think I broke the computer.